David sat quietly at the edge of the grand wedding hall, lost in the hum of laughter and clinking glasses. The room sparkled with fairy lights, flowers lined every table, and the air buzzed with celebration. But none of it reached him. In his worn dark suit, he looked out at a sea of smiling faces, families embracing, couples dancing, children twirling in joy. Everyone belonged somewhere. Except him. In his hand, he held a small white envelope. Inside was a simple card and a check, a gift for his daughter, Emily. He had raised her alone after her mother passed away when Emily was just 5. He remembered her first bike ride, her school recitals, the night she cried over her first heartbreak. He had been there for all of it. Yet here he was, watching her wedding unfold from a distance. No one had called him to the head table. No one asked him to pose for family pictures. And Emily, his little girl in a white dress, hadn't yet looked his way. It wasn't anger he felt. It was something heavier, something lonelier. As if all those years of love and sacrifice had faded into the background of her new life. Still, David stayed. He didn't want to make a scene or cause discomfort. This was her day. He had promised himself he would smile no matter what. But in that moment, as music played and laughter filled the air, David felt like a guest at someone else's joy. A stranger at his own daughter's wedding. As David sat quietly at the back of the hall, the music and celebration faded into the background, replaced by a stream of memories that began to play like a film in his mind. Each scene was a chapter of the life he had built with Emily, just the two of them against the world. He remembered holding her tiny hand on the first day of kindergarten, hiding his own tears so she wouldn't be scared. The nights he stayed up sewing her Halloween costumes by hand, trying to give her the childhood she deserved. The meals he skipped so she could eat better, the overtime hours, the broken car he never fixed because her school fees came first. There were joyful memories too, her laughter as they danced in the living room to old songs, her sleepy goodnights, and the proud moment when she got her college acceptance letter. Every sacrifice had been worth it just to see her succeed. But now, watching her at the center of the crowd, surrounded by friends, in-laws, and people who barely knew her story, David felt invisible. Not bitter, but quietly heartbroken. Had those years meant as much to her as they had to him? His love had been silent, steady, and unconditional. But tonight, it seemed forgotten. As the past blended with the present, David didn't crave recognition. He just longed for a glance, a smile, something to show that he still mattered. Instead, he sat with his memories, the only place where he was still seen. The reception was in full swing now. Guests raised their glasses, laughter echoing through the hall as one by one, family and friends stood to give toasts. Each speech was filled with love, joy, and carefully chosen words. Stories were shared about the bride's childhood, the couple's journey, and the people who shaped them into who they were today. David listened quietly, his glass resting untouched in front of him. His ears caught phrases like, "those who were always there," and, "the ones who guided us," but his name was never spoken. Faces lit up as people were acknowledged, teachers, aunts, mentors, even family friends. But the man who had been there for every scraped knee, every sleepless night, every tear and triumph, remained unnoticed. He lowered his eyes, the sting of silence settling deep. It wasn't that he needed the spotlight, David had never been that kind of man. But as each name was lovingly called out, he couldn't help but feel like he'd been gently erased from his daughter's story. Slowly, he lifted his glass in a quiet, private toast. "To you, baby girl," he whispered under his breath, his voice barely audible beneath the music. "No matter where you go, I'll always be proud." No one saw the toast. No one heard the words. But in that quiet moment, David offered his love the only way he knew how, silently, selflessly, and without expectation. Just as he always had. The music shifted to something softer, more emotional. The father-daughter dance had just ended. Guests clapped politely as Emily stepped away from the dance floor, her white dress trailing behind her like a whisper of dreams come true. She smiled, thanked people along the way, but as her eyes scanned the room, something shifted in her expression. There, in the far corner of the hall, she finally saw him. Her father. Alone. Still seated. His posture tired, his smile faint, his presence quiet and unassuming, just like always. And in that instant, it hit her. She had been swept up in the whirlwind of planning, of people, of picture-perfect moments. But in doing so, she had somehow left behind the one person who had never once left her side. The man who braided her hair for school, who stood outside in the rain during her soccer games, who sacrificed his life so she could build hers. Her heart clenched. How could she have missed him? Not just physically, but emotionally. She hadn't even introduced him to her in-laws. He hadn't danced. He hadn't spoken. He hadn't been included in the speeches. And yet, he had been everything. Without a word, Emily turned from the crowd and walked toward him. Not slowly, but with purpose, tears already forming in her eyes. Guests turned, watching as the bride made her way to the quiet corner where her father sat, unaware of what was coming. She didn't wait for permission. She reached for his hand and simply said, "Come with me, Dad." David looked up, surprised, as Emily stood before him, her hand outstretched, her eyes shimmering with tears. For a moment, he hesitated, unsure if he was dreaming. But then she smiled, the same way she used to when she was a little girl asking him to dance in the kitchen after dinner. She gently took his hand. "Come with me, Dad," she repeated, her voice soft but full of emotion. The room quieted as she led him to the center of the dance floor. Guests paused their conversations, turning to watch. Whispers floated through the crowd. Some smiled, some wiped their eyes, but everyone felt it, something real was happening. The music shifted again, slower now. Emily placed her father's hands on her waist and rested her head on his shoulder. David's eyes welled up. His daughter, his little girl, had remembered. She had seen him. Not as a forgotten guest, but as her father. The one who had walked every hard mile to get her here. They swayed gently under the soft lights, surrounded by quiet tears and warm smiles. The room that once felt so far away suddenly embraced them both. It wasn't about appearances anymore, it was about connection, about love that never needed to be loud to be deep. As the song played on, Emily whispered, "I'm sorry I didn't see you sooner, but I'll never forget again." And David, through tears and laughter, finally felt it, he wasn't on the outside anymore. He was home, in her heart, where he had always belonged.